All right, my babies. How are we today? What is going on? Okay, so today's script, let's just jump in, is about abdicating, to renounce one's throne. Uh, so I got this word because of a book I read, which was called The Motive. I loved that book. It's a short booklet that basically describes the life of a CEO who kind of like just wanted the CEO position for the title. And the idea behind it is the guy thought that he deserved the CEO position, but he didn't really want it. So effectively, what he would do when it comes to like the work that he's supposed to be basically like doing, he would delegate most of the things. And it's funny that book basically describes the CEO's job as basically like strengthening the relationship between the people that are actually like influencing the company more than it is actually like working on something. Which is funny because ultimately, uh, what I did was I reflected on my project naturally, and it was in early one June, basically the beginning of June of last year, which means it was in a stage where I was like looking at who I'm going to work with, who I'm going to hire, and that was the stage where I started interviewing everyone. It was like an intense 3 weeks where I only interviewed software engineers, and I think 2 weeks where I was interviewing business analysts. And then I think it was like 2 weeks where I was interviewing UI UX designers. Like that fun part, right? Because they kind of go like, I have to do this, and then I have to make this. I have to pick one of the decisions that need to be made. So just the word abdicating, kind of like to renounce one's throne, and ultimately it's just like everything comes with responsibility, right? And what we do with that responsibility is something that is a bit intense the side of the from our own personalized perspective of it, because it's most of the time we kind of want to reach the top but we don't want to go through the journey, right? We don't want to ride to the top, we want just the helicopter ride to get there, kind of like be like, hey, I'm at the top, instead of like I made it to the top kind of thing. And so the process of our own responsibilities being abdicated is basically the word that's coming to me is basically like that's naivety. Like our approach towards ourselves becomes a bit more on the naive side. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with the word naive, but the idea is I think naivety is good, but being naive towards the outside world is where like I would say the energy slash curiosity comes from. But being naive towards yourself, we can't use naive when it comes to yourself. We can only use ignorance. So the concept of abdicating is when you when you pick a decision out of the decisions that could be made, and ultimately you committed to that decision, or you chose that decision without commitment. And what happens when you choose that decision without commitment? You either like rely on others without like the proper knowledge of like what to do in case they don't pull through, or you just trust others and like hope for the best. That's where I think like most of our failures are, because we relinquish that space in between, that space that connects us to the actual like work that needs to be done, which is where I say responsibility like kind of comes in, because once a decision has been chosen, what we have to do is make sure it's completed. And it's like a thought, right? Like if you have a thought, that you don't really like finish, it kind of sticks around until you complete it. And when you complete it, it's gone. It doesn't matter. That closure that people talk about, that what happened and how did it happen, and that like ending. And I think that's a mind thing. It's like your mind craves like fulfillment. I feel that's the proper word. And so abdicating. What are the ways that we abdicate in our day-to-day lives? What are the ways where there are times where you kind of like carry too much instead of relying on others. But I think that's where the dance in between, like knowing what the fuck you're doing and having no clue and being ignorant, kind of comes into place. Because your duties towards yourself are mainly a clear awareness of what exactly that needs to be done or is to be done or has to happen for like has to happen regardless, right? For something to kind of like for the decision to be complete, to go through its all process. Like the decision is there, it's already been made. That's the decision that we chose. We're going through with that decision, which is either leading to a sense of direction or organizing or orienting something. And what effectively happens is you overall kind of like destructuring the why that decision was chosen, maybe, is what kind of like allows us to see the stages of its existence or the stages of its completion. And so by abdicating, what we do is we relinquish these stages because like each stage comes with separate effort, maybe, or each stage comes with separate like requirements or information. And ultimately, it's easier for us to just like give the job to somebody else. And here's where I say hope for the best, because ultimately what we're doing is we're kind of like when you're not involved in the process itself, you're kind of like, okay, if you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, then we're good. But your goals, specifically when you're the guy that's basically when you're the person that's coordinating your own, should I say existence? Because our reality is in our head, and basically picking a decision is normally picking a decision is normally the one that's supposed to translate our reality into the real world, which means I have to coordinate this transition from my head into the real world. And that coordination is where we tend to make a mistake because it's going to happen, but if you're not there, it's going to happen in a way that doesn't suit you. We can use that because if I could rely on somebody that's unreliable, and then whatever comes out of them that's supposed to contribute to this transition, this translation, effectively would not contribute in a way that works because I have to consistently be communicating and making sure that what I'm trying to do is what they're doing or what I want. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is basically still aligned with what they're doing. And that's where your own sovereignty kind of kicks in because when you're sovereign, you're fully taking charge of yourself. You're losing that ignorance or you're accepting that ignorance about yourself and you're doing something about it instead of abdicating the responsibilities that come with that ignorance. So effectively, because if there's something that you want to do and it doesn't exist, which means you still are not the person that is able to do it. And the reason for that is probably because you need skills, you need like changes to happen. Like me having my own house, for example, that I built by hand probably requires me to build a house. So I'm still not the person who built the house, who builds houses. And that's basically a requirement. So effectively what we're doing is we're looking at where we're ignorant and basically taking that responsibility. And even though I don't necessarily have to be the person that builds my house with my own hands, but getting the people to build the house. There's a big difference between I have an image of this house being built versus I want a roof on top of my head. These come with different requirements. And I feel that's the detail that we kind of like miss when it comes to our own selves. Because we assume the world kind of sees us for who we are when we ourselves don't really know who we are. And that's how and so our expression of who we are is not really honest, simply because we're moving with the assumption that everything is going to reflect what we think we are instead of what we truly are. And it's funny because like I was actually like listening to a podcast the other day, and the guy was discussing like the differences between belief, like influencing people's beliefs, and not influencing, and and that is practically incite anger, allow driven thought, primary information questioning, like get someone over to emotional disfield, thoughts and ideas. The difference between like what I think I am is basically like the shallow version, like the actual like surface side expression that I put out, or I think I put out, versus like what they tell people, what they talk about when it comes to people. Like the difference between if somebody asks like who is Tariq, and my response is probably going to be I do this, I do that, or I am this guy or that guy. Yeah, so the difference between what I think I am versus what I actually like tell people, what I talk to people about. So I'm really okay. So should I pause? She's going through my notes, man. Yeah. So, anyways, the whole video was about abdicating and the idea of maybe that's where like, yeah, it's really just like that. When we're ignorant about ourselves, what effectively we do is we trust that others see more to us than what we see in ourselves. And at the very least, that's like a whole lot of responsibility for people that probably don't need it or shouldn't have it. Even if they do a good job, it's not harmonious, right? It's just like your acknowledgement is probably enough for you for things to kind of like run smoother. But anyways, it's a video. I'm sure it'll get better.